After hearing different sides of the argument and then weighing all the different options, I've decided that I am fully behind and support the ADOS movement. However, for myself, these are just some suggestions I would like to bring to the table. I'm not saying that everyone will have to agree with me, but this is what I would like to bring to the table in addition, or maybe that's a little different. One point is that when it comes to reparations, restitution, what is owed and what should be paid, not only, although primarily, not only should we bring forward grievances against the so-called United States of America, but we should also bring grievances to non-American powers and institutions that had a role in the slave trade. So that would include the British, that would include the French, that would include the Dutch, that would include Jews, but then that would include Arabs and Muslims, but it would also include possibly perhaps certain tribes on the continent or countries as they may exist. We have to cover the facts. We have to cover the history, and we have to bring up what simply happened without any type of bias or prejudice. However, I cannot stress this enough. The main focus for us, the Afro-Americans, ADOS, should be on the United States and the companies and the individuals that we have mainly suffered under slavery when it was going on, and then the practices that were put in place since the days of official slavery. Now, the next thing that I want to get into is you have to be careful about alienating other groups in the diaspora that do have the same experience as we do over here. I don't want to water down the movement by any circumstance, but you have to understand that people like the Haitians or the Jamaicans, Afro-Mexicans, Afro-Brazilians, various other groups, they suffered the similar types of things that we suffered in their respective countries as we did here. Okay. They were subjugated with slavery and colonialism, just like we were. Now, all of us over here in the U.S. don't necessarily agree, and some of us don't act right. And you're going to get the same thing over there with these other members of the diaspora outside of the continent. You know, they don't all necessarily agree with each other, and a number of them don't act right, whether if it's in their countries or if they come here to the United States. But for the ones who do act right, and for the ones of them who are on board with us, we should not alienate those groups of brothers and sisters that are part of the diaspora outside of the continent. We need to link up and collaborate. Now, I will say this, just as charity begins at the home, as we fight and pursue what we're working for with what the United States owes us, ultimately, it's their main responsibility in their respective countries to fight for reparations in those other countries. But as someone once put it, for the ones that do come over here into the United States, they need to realize when they come here, they're on the same team that we're on, and they should not work against us. And it would probably, especially if they intend to stay here and make roots here, they should probably work with us and not try to separate themselves from us. I would extend the same thing to Afro-Americans, ADOS, that travels to these other countries. When you go to these other countries, with our brethren, our brothers and sisters in other countries that have suffered the same types of things that we have. You should not work against them. And especially if you plan to make roots or business connections in those other countries, it would be in your interest to work with them and not against them, or to separate yourselves from them or act like somehow you're better. None of us is better. Okay, we're all dealing with the same thing. The epidemic of whiteism is a worldwide problem, so we all need to work together. But for those of us that are still in the countries where our ancestors have suffered, we need to fight for that first. And then we can work and build bridges across the diaspora. But I don't want to see Afro-Americans, ADOS, drop the ball and try to work for the benefit of Afro-Mexicans across the border. Even with what they deal with just recently being recognized on the census, and their percentage there is a much smaller percentage than our percentage over here in the U.S. I don't think we should drop our priorities in support of them, because we need to secure what we need to secure for ourselves first. Then we can branch out. Charity begins at the home. Another thing with ADOS that has come into questions, well, what about mixed? What about mixed ethnicity? People who have different parents or different grandparents. Now, as I've stated before in other videos, that I'm a traditionalist. Okay, I come from the old school. I come from biblical principles. And I believe in the patriarchy. I believe in primarily a patrilineal way of looking at things in society. So one step that I'm going to start with is, who is the father, or who are the fathers? Okay, because especially when a father is there in the home, when the father is the headship of the household, raising the children and having responsibility and accountability, that tends to be better for the family. That tends to be better for the children. Okay, so if someone is mixed and if they have an Afro father, I'm going to feel a little bit better about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have children or offspring or fruits that don't act right or don't have any issues. But statistically, it tends to be better because the man is the headship. On the other side of it, when the male or the father is a non-Afro man or non-ADOS, and the woman, the mother, is the Afro individual or ADOS, under the traditional construct, that man will be the headship. So what are you going to assume when you have the headship of an Afro woman or ADOS that is not an Afro man or ADOS? And therefore, if he, someone who is an other or an outsider, is the headship, what would that mean with the children, how they may look at the world, what their worldview may be, and how they identify themselves and how they identify with the rest of us? Now, I'm not saying that you can't have some of these mixed children who have non-Afro fathers that cannot be allies and are not with us and are not down with us, whether they come from the United States or from other countries. But to use that as a bit of a starting point, not a finality or a totality, I think that's the best way to go. Because if we have strong families and strong fathers in the home, that can go a very long way. Okay? But I don't want to alienate people just because they may have some different parents or they have maybe different skin shades. And as Dr. King talked about, even specifically within our own group, we need to judge people by the quality of their character, the content of their character, not simply the color of their skin or who their parents are, but some of these things can be starting points or clues or indicators. It shouldn't be the final decision, but I do believe that it should definitely be a part of the equation. Okay. So I agree with those things. I don't want to overstate or overpromote what recent diaspora immigrants in the United States have done, economically and socially. Just as if we were to have individuals who are ADOS that work against us or don't work in our interests, sellouts, the bourgeoisie. We need to call out these other immigrants of the diaspora if they feel like they're better than us, if they look down upon us, if they separate themselves from us, and if they feel like that the issues that have taken place in this country is not our fight. That's just simply not the case. And especially when it comes to the continent, these immigrants who come from the continent from other countries and other tribes, the thing with them is they at least have a country to go back to. A Nigerian can go back to Nigeria. An Angolan or Angolese can go back to Angola. An Ethiopian can go back to Ethiopia. Okay? For those of us who are ADOS in the United States, we don't have a backup plan as far as like a dual citizenship or a mother country or a mother tribe to go back to. Now, I do believe that we should all get passports. I do believe that we should all travel. I am paying attention to what's going on with the African Union and with the talks of a one African passport, and then the representation that the diaspora outside of the continent has with the African Union and the different regions. I am looking into those things, but we need to understand that, yes, it's different from us, and as well as the Caribbean. Okay, with these countries on the continent and with these Caribbean countries, they have an origin point that's different than us. And if something should ever happen, or they could come over here, they could make some money, they could invest, they could come over here legally, and then they always have a country they could go back to, whether if it's an island or if it's on the continent, if it's the mainland. We have to create that ADOS. The descendants of the ones who suffered under American and still suffer under American apartheid. We have to create those backup plans. We have to create those contingency plans for ourselves. We weren't simply given those things as a birthright because we were born in different countries. We were born here. Okay, so that's something that's worth mentioning as far as looking at the differences between ourselves, ADOS, and other brothers and sisters that are across the diaspora. Now, like I say, I think this is important. We need to establish some kind of ground rules. We need to establish some kind of boundaries and some definitions here. But it should not be divisive, okay? But there needs to be a protocol that goes with this. And when you see brothers and sisters that are outside of the borders of the United States and they come here, and if they act out, and if they act against our interests, and if they want to separate themselves from us and distance themselves from us, or if they look down upon us, or they want to act uppity, or they want to act like the bourgeoisie, they need to be called out, and their behaviors and their actions need to be corrected. And I would say the same thing for those who were born here and whose parents and grandparents and great grandparents were born here within these borders, because we know a lot of them can do the same thing too. They don't have to be a foreigner. They don't have to be an immigrant. We have these issues even internally, even without talking about immigrants. Okay, but we need to practice unity. We need to come together. We need to secure what we can within our respective countries first and then collaborate. We need to travel, get your passports, and also language. That's another thing I'm doing. We have our brothers and sisters across the world speak different languages. Now, we could talk about that later as far as maybe should we come up with one language to unify all of us, but I have experience with French, I have experience with Spanish, and I've been learning Portuguese, and I plan to learn additional languages as they would be needed, and as my travels and as my interactions will change over the years, and even weeks and months, I will add to that when it comes to language. Okay. So we need to hook up, link up, have a cultural exchange. We need to talk about our histories. We need to talk about our common issues and grievances. We need to be able to be fluent to communicate so there's no confusion in language or things that get lost in translation. We need to work together. We need to have some kind of common ground and unity, but especially when it comes to the United States, because economically, when it comes to the diaspora, this is the greatest, I'm going to say, many Afro-Americans can start with a better economic basis in a number of ways because of the economy of the United States compared to the economies of a lot of these other countries. And that's whether if it's a Mexico or Brazil or Colombia or Dominican Republic or an Ethiopia or South Africa or Ghana, lots of different countries. Okay. I'm not saying that we just have everything, because that would be kind of prescribing to that whole American exceptionalism bull crap, brainwash garbage, which is not true. There's nothing exceptional about America. America has never been exceptional. America has never been great. Show me. I can't find it. But we do have some economic advantages that maybe some of these other countries don't have, regardless of the skin colors or the ethnicities. But since we are, or we're born here, our parents are born here, great grandparents, grandparents, so on and so forth, we need to secure the bag that America owes us as we work with our brothers and sisters across the world. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay. We need to prioritize what needs to be done here within these borders for the time being. But at the same time, we also need to look to make moves in other locations and with our brothers and sisters around the world. So from here on out, it's gonna be ADOS.